Oh, man. Kids, I don't know. It's just like, wow. What an honor, what a treat. For those that I hadn't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Meyers, and I'm an alcoholic. It's so cool to be here. You know, one of the cool things about doing this stuff is that I mean, the bad news about this workshop is that it's right where it is, right after lunchtime. Everybody's in a carbohydrate funk, and they're all kind of dozing off. And man, there's nothing I'd like more than to go find a bed to lay down in right now. And I understand. So, if you need to get up while I'm talking and scratch a little bit, and just kind of walk, it doesn't bother me a bit. Okay, I don't. If you start throwing stuff, it might bother me a little bit, but it doesn't. Between the dodging the flies, I'm a little bit jumpy in here anyway, as it is. Like, wow, wow, wow. There are some things that I love to talk about, and some of them are kind of weird, and we probably won't talk about those things. But there's also there's a lot of stuff around sponsorship and around big book stuff that I absolutely adore to talk about. Because there were a lot of things in recovery. There were a lot of things in early AA, my AA experience, that did not include sponsorship. I mean, I'm a meeting makers make it kind of guy, and I love going to meetings and stuff. And I owned a big book. I never read a big book. I knew what a sponsor was, but I never got one. I knew what the steps were because they were on the wall, but I never worked any of them. So you get a bead on where I am. I'm a poster boy, absolute poster boy of the fact that you can possibly stay sober in these rooms and not do anything except just show up. Can you do that and stay sober and happy is the big question. And for a lot of us, that was the problem. You see, after a while you begin to understand, and I think some of you found out the hard way, just like I did, that staying sober sometimes is the easy part. The hard part is, can I stay happy? Can I stay comfortable in my own skin? Can I go home and have my wife be glad that I'm home? Can I walk into a room and my kids aren't doing this, ducking because I mean, it's crazy. And so we'll talk about this a little bit tonight, but I just, some of the things that we discovered early on about sponsorship is that there's 1 billion different opinions. 1 billion of them. And so let's get something straight, like going in, okay? I don't want to ever come across as some kind of an authority on anything. That's above my pay grade already. I've just been around long enough, almost 26 years now. I've watched a whole bunch of people come into AA, and I've watched a whole bunch of people leave AA, and I'm a ferocious observer of our program. I'm going to watch you and watch you and watch you, and when you fail, I'm going to ask you why you think you failed. When you're a success, I'm going to ask you why you think you're a success, and I do this ad nauseum. It drives people nuts. But as a result of this, you begin to put together a picture of things that look different sometimes. It's like for years and years and years and years, I just simply assumed that what had been spoon-fed me in AA was doctrine. It was real. Now, I'm too lazy to read the big book. I'm just too lazy to do this. And so I'm just simply going to... When you tell me certain things, I'm going to buy into those deals, and you can form a whole recovery doctrine based on opinions and ideas, and none of them come out of the book. Well, the problem with that is that what if you're getting good advice, then you've got a good doctrine, but what if you're getting crappy advice? You see, then all of a sudden things get goofy. Well, in no area has that happened more than around the area of sponsorship. So let me see if I can get you to see this thing from a different perspective. How many of you guys remember when you were out there drinking or drugging and pain was the great motivator to get here? I mean, most of us, that's what finally says, okay, it's time to go. The pain of being out there is enough that you just say, I'm not going to do this anymore. You see? It's almost exactly the same thing when you start looking at your ideas and opinions around AA. Sometimes we need to be able to look and see there needs to be some motivation for investigating why I should change my mind about anything. You understand what I'm saying? So if what we're doing is working, there's no sense in changing it. But what happens if what we're doing is not working, and I still am doing the same thing? Doesn't that sound stupid? And yet I watch thousands and thousands of people worldwide do just that. Meeting makers make it, and so we have a doctrine in a lot of AA places. Geographically, it may not be that way here. I'm not judging any of this, but geographically, there's some places where big book recovery, where meeting recovery has taken the place of big book based, step based recovery. And so your whole recovery depends on how many meetings you're going to. You see, this is problematic, guys, because let me tell you something. We'll talk about it some tonight too. This becomes a problem because there's a whole bunch of you that had the same experience that I did. I'm going to 6 meetings a week, and I'm as crazy as I can be. You see what I'm saying? The meeting doesn't treat the internal condition, which is alcoholism. Now, what does this have to do with sponsorship? Everything. Because if your head is to a place to where you have your head made up, my mind's made up. My sponsor told me that we would work the steps in a year, and it would always take a year, and you couldn't do it any quicker than that. Now, what is that? That's an opinion, his opinion, that he's passed on to you, and you have a choice in any of this situation, whether you investigate it and say, yes, I agree with that, or maybe there's another way to do that. I'm not saying it's not the way to do it. I'm just saying the old ideas are what kicks our butt. How many of you guys had old ideas about stuff, and it was really hard to get you to change your idea about some of that? You see? I mean, all men are jerks. Well, that's an old idea. Couldn't we just agree that maybe some men are jerks? Yeah. But not all men. There are some good guys out there somewhere. You might have to turn over a few rocks to find one of them, but you understand what I'm saying. It's the old ideas that get us into trouble on the deal. And so we end up getting spoon-fed a bunch of this stuff, and it's baffling to me how often in our rooms we have people say, the new guys are going to know when it's time to do the work. And I'm going, when the pain gets enough, they'll start doing the work. That's not been my experience. My experience is when the pain gets enough, they'll go drink. That's what my experience has been. We expect the new guy to motivate this and to set the time frame and do all that. Why? Why do we do this? And I see it like that everywhere I go. Guys, some of you already think, it's important for you to understand, there's probably nobody that you're going to ever meet that loves AA more than I do. I absolutely love this fellowship. But it's because I love it so much, and it's because I spend so much time looking at the broader picture, not just my home group, I'm looking at a broader picture of our fellowship in general, that I began to get real sensitized to some of the goofiness that goes on. We're going to talk about some of it tonight. But around the area of sponsorship, listen, there are geographic areas that I've traveled to where there is nobody sponsoring anybody. Nobody is sponsoring anybody. Or you'll find geographic areas where 2 broke up, beat up older ladies are sponsoring 4 counties worth of women because there's nobody to step up and take up the slack. We see it all the time, all the time. One of the most contentious conversations I ever had with anybody was that after a workshop one day, and this guy says, Meyers, I just don't agree with anything you say. I said, terrific. Next. I'm not here to argue with anybody. And he goes, no, you're going to hear me out on this thing. He says, you could only effectively sponsor one guy your whole AA career. And I went, excuse me? And he goes, yeah, maybe 2 at the most, but that's it. Like that. And I'm going, what? Are you trying to raise them? Are you sending them to college too? I mean, what? Where did you get that opinion? And he goes, well, that's what my sponsor said. And I said, well, respectfully, your sponsor's wrong. Next. I just want the guy to go away, but he's not going to go away. He wants to fight about it. The point is that, and I finally just said, listen, let's get something straight. My deal is, if you would sponsor more, I could sponsor less. I mean, I get goofy around the idea of handfuls of men and women sponsoring 90% of the people. It shouldn't be that way. There's nowhere in the book that it said that. There's nowhere in chapter 7, working with others, when it said, I'm getting hot. I got to get this off here a minute. Let me explain something. That's much better. Okay, I'm going to take these off too. I'm just going to, no. I'm just kidding you. We got to stay awake here. Okay. The deal is that when I was 6 months sober, there was this guy that showed up at a meeting one night, and he was from a local group, and I sort of respected him right off the bat. He'd been around for a year or two. And from the podium one night at this talk, he said, you know, folks, he said, there are good 12-steppers and there are bad 12-steppers. And if you're a bad 12-stepper, you just have no business doing that. What you need to do is just let somebody that's good at it do that. And I could have kissed the guy. I mean, he was my hero. I thought, because what he did was he took away every responsibility I had to carry the message. I didn't have to do any of that. I don't have to sponsor. Because I'm convinced 100% that I'm going to be a total, complete idiot around sponsorship. I'm never going to be able to do it. I'm too slow. I'm too busy. You can just fill in the blank. It doesn't make any difference. But all of us come into that. My experience has been that most of us come in here with a head full of excuses why I can't effectively sponsor somebody. And most of them are just crazy lies that our head tells us that aren't true at all. How many of you know or in your own experience have discovered that the stories that you told yourself about your ability to sponsor were just lies? That once you got into it, you realized, hey, wait a minute. I'm not sure where it came from. I'm not sure how I did it. But these guys are catching on. These guys are getting this thing. And I'm digging it, and they're digging it, and I'm going to keep doing it for the rest of my life. Yeah, this happens all the time, guys. All the time. So So my attempt, anytime that I'm doing this, anytime we talk about a workshop deal, is to look at the nuts and bolts of this thing a little bit and see if we just can't make it a little simpler. How many of you guys were around in 1969, 1970, 71? Some of you old dudes from last night. In 1971, there was a piece of legislation called the Hughes Act. Just stick with me. This is only about this long of this thing, but I think it's important for you to understand it like that. The Hughes Act was the last piece of legislation that Nixon signed into office before he hit the road. And he hated the legislation, and he signed it anyway, and there was a lot of stuff around. The stories are fairly fascinating about how it came up. But what the Hughes Act did was, the Hughes Act put teeth in the medical view of alcoholism and drug addiction so that treatment centers could now charge money for treatment. And so there were some other pieces of it too, but that was the primary, the big ticket item on the act was that. So between 1935 and 1971, it took us 36 years for 500,000 members of AA to get here. 36 years to get that. In the preceding years after the Hughes Act, in the next 5 years, so from 1971 to 1976, 500,000 more people were added to the rolls. So we did in 5 years what it had taken us 36 years to do ahead of time, and all these people came to treatment. When they got into treatment, they were told to go where? AA. AA. Are these people welcome in our program? Sure. Our traditions are clear on that. The problem we ran into is there were a lot of these people that were sent to us that were not alcoholics. They had other issues that they were dealing with. They had other stuff that was going on. And so what we ended up with is we ended up with rooms full of people that some of them were bona fide. My buddy Mikey, a bona fide drunk, and then we had some disco guy over here that wasn't a drunk at all, that had other issues that he was dealing with. Was he welcome in the fellowship? Yeah, listen, we're not talking about a description of alcoholism, we're talking about membership in our fellowship. The problem is that while Mike shared his experience, strength, and hope around the idea of his alcoholism, we had Disco Boy over here sharing God knows what. You see what I'm saying? And so because we've, as a fellowship, got book illiterate, we just kind of drifted off to one side with the whole idea. What we ended up with is we ended up with a whole bunch of us that just didn't get this. That we were piecing together doctrine that was cobbled together like some Frankenstein monster, and it didn't bear any resemblance to what this was. You all understand that, right? And so we ended up with this kind of crazy deal. Nice people? Yeah. Because listen, if they'd have been jerks, it would have been real easy to go, hey, you jerk, get out of here. But they were nice people. These were people that loved us to death. My problem was, and still is, that they were vocal. They welcome to come, just shut up. I just don't want any more talk about it, you know? You're talking about an experience that you have not had, and it's problematic. Can we get an amen to some of you like that? Some of you sound like I'm talking heresy here like that. There's some. All right, let me clear this up. What made this even worse, what was more distracting, I think, than even that, was that our own fellowship, New York, and the General Service Office began to publish literature that was in direct conflict with the Big Book. So you ended up with pamphlets that were being printed that didn't line up with what our text said. And more and more and more. I wish we could do a whole workshop sometime just on this piece, on this beginner's pamphlet that they came up with in the late 70s or early 80s. Guys, it makes me weepy to look at it like that. The things that they say like that. They list. I mean, this was conference-approved brochure stuff that we printed, and we're out there telling them. What we began to do is, as a fellowship, we began to move away from the idea that this whole thing was a disease of our body and mind, that there was a spiritual component to this deal. We began to move away from that to the idea that this was all causal in nature, that it was a behavior problem. And there's where we run into trouble, guys, because if alcoholism and drug addiction is a behavior problem, we're going to treat it in a different way. If it's a behavior problem, then why do we need to treat it spiritually? We don't. This is part of the problem, you see. And so what began to happen was, in that brochure, they had 11 primary topics that we were supposed to use for chairing a beginner's meeting. Well, every group had a beginner's meeting in there, and they were wanting you to use this program. But the brochure talked ad nauseum about how we keep ourselves sober one day at a time. How we keep ourselves sober one day at a time. There's a big fly in that ointment. There was no mention of God in the middle of the program. There was no mention of a spiritual experience in the middle of a program. It was just simply, do this, rearrange that, do this. Wow. Don't turn left because you'll go by a bar, go right. It was all, we're just going to simply try to manipulate everything out here so that we can keep sober in here. Big problem, right? How many of y'all have tried to do that? I just won't hang out with those guys anymore. Well, I mean, terrific. I understand the common sense around that thought process. Out of the 11 topics on that deal, the last piece in there was, you might try working the steps. That was the last suggestion in the pamphlet. Wow. If that wasn't bad enough, living sober, that piece of crap, that book went through the whole book and never even mentioned the steps. They don't even mention it. Finally, after some pushback from Australia last year, they've agreed to reprint it, republish it, and they're going to put a copy of the steps in the back of the book. Again, it was all this back focus like this, that we keep ourselves sober one day at a time. No, we don't. Listen, let's be clear, guys. Go back and look in the text anywhere you want to look like that. It's not in there like that. We've been taught it so many times and taught it so many times. What did Dr. Bob say? We live life one day at a time. But we stay sober for good and for always. That's what he said. We don't keep ourselves sober one day at a time. We make great decisions every day based on our spiritual condition like this. We make decisions to get on our knees and pray. We make decisions to be of service to somebody else. Y'all get that? Some of y'all aren't digging this at all. That's okay. I'll post my email address. You can just send me the emails and we'll talk about it. On page 53 of the GSO handbook, there's this cool little piece in there that says, the sole purpose of an AA group is to offer sobriety through the teaching and practice of the 12 steps. I'll read it slower. It's important. The sole purpose of the AA group is to offer sobriety through the teaching and practice of AA's 12 steps. If that's what they're telling us, and if that's what our truth is, then how come we spend so much time in AA talking about, I can't get my cat to potty train? You pick the meeting, guys. Welcome to Texas. I'm telling you, I was raised in the epicenter of middle-of-the-road solution in Dallas, Texas. It is horrible, the things that will pass as AA. And I'm just telling you, with this as clear direction, we'll ignore that. You see? Tonight we'll read some more like that. I'll be nicer tonight, I promise you. But this thing, let me explain something. The reason that this is problematic is because every one of us, man, woman, and child in AA, gets lulled into this sense that what we're doing, that what we've been taught is it. And all I'm asking you to do is just simply this. I'm not asking you to be a skeptic. I'm just asking you to just simply, out of great judgment, just simply begin to look at what your program looks like and just ask yourself the question, is what I'm doing part of a problem or is it part of a solution? The big book on page 17 talks about our common solution. It ought to look reasonably the same. And yet, wherever you go geographically, pay attention to the meetings that you go to and how different some of them are. Absolutely amazing how crazy some of the meetings are out there that pass for AA. And then we as a fellowship get judged mercilessly, because of the crazy stuff that goes on. And yet there's very few of us that are willing to stand up and go, hold it, hoss, right there. We're not going to do this, you see. because it takes courage to do that, and I get that. But I think when you're spoon-fed doctrine, it's like the stuff that we were talking about. It's like that. What was that game we used to play when we were telegraph or telephone or something like this? And I'm going to whisper something in Elaine's ear, and she'll lean over to that lady next to her, and she'll whisper something, and by the time it gets over here, it's begun to change and alter. And you poor bastards in the back, y'all are just totally screwed because you're not going to get anywhere close to the same message because we just do that. But that's the problem with an oral tradition. That's the problem with this stuff, and this is the reason we get into trouble. You see, none of us want to believe that what we're carrying is not the truth. And yet I, as a card-carrying member of that group, at that club, had to look at it and realize that about 80% of the things that I was telling the men that I was working with was wrong. It was wrong. It was all based on somebody's opinion. And so what I had to do was go back and get in the text. It's the reason I was just simply giddy with excitement this morning, listening to Mike and listening to Elaine last night, and then again this morning, and those guys earlier, Don, and listening to these men talk right out of the book about stuff that was unarguably programmed. I mean, there was no debate about this kind of stuff. You all get that. So let's look at it. I just want to look at some big ticket items on here, some pieces that I think that are important that we look at. Let me ask you just a rhetorical question. If you were sponsoring somebody, when do you think it's ready? It's time to get them in the book. You ever stop and think about it? Like right now? Okay. It's an amazing thing, guys. Now listen, I want you to understand, I come from an area where most of AA is very free-flowing. You come and you sit, and we want you to feel comfortable in the meeting. We're just going to love you into the fellowship kind of thing, and eventually you'll absorb some of this stuff, and you might make it and you might not make it. My problem is this, is that in meetings that I went to for years and years and years like that, what would happen is that Andrea, is that it? She would come into a meeting and she would sit there like this, and we would love on her like this and rub her neck and tell her it's going to be okay and keep coming back. It works if you work it. We're going to tell her everything. We're going to spawn a lot of chicken shit stuff off the wall. We're going to do everything we can except get her in the work. And so when she begins to get sick sitting in the meeting, we're going to be just like, we're throwing our best stuff at her, man. We love this girl. And she's getting sick because love is not enough. Listen, I don't want to stir anybody up. My problem is I don't want to be provocative, but by the same token, if love was enough, your mom and dad would have got you sober. Scouts honor. Scouts honor. The people in your life that loved you would have got you sober like that. Love is a great thing, and love is something that we cannot do without. It's a big part of this deal, but there better be something else besides just love. We love her. But when she disappears one day, and it happens every day, we got tens of thousands of us coming, and we have thousands and thousands leaving, and we always got these guys in the back of the room with their arms folded up, being all judgmental and going, well, booze will drag her back in here. It's not my experience. It might be your experience, but it's not mine. My experience is she'll walk back out there and go get in her kitchen, and she'll drink herself to death. That's what I see day after day after day. I know it makes some of you guys sweat BBs when I talk about this kind of stuff. We got to get clear of this, guys. We have to get clear of this. We have to be more proactive, and we have to be more understanding. Either the steps are a solution, either the steps are a pathway to a spiritual experience that we've never had, and that's where we're going to focus, or we're not. And if we're not, why don't we call this something else? Why don't we just make up our own fellowship and call it that? We're Lovers Anonymous, and we'll just love each other into the deal like that. It just drives me crazy. Okay, So here's the question like that. I tell you what, let me tell you a story. I want to change directions on this. It's just a real quick little story like that. About 10 years ago in Kent, England, there was this is just south of London, there was a men's workshop that I had chaired a couple of times. And during the course of the weekend, I kept hearing some weird stuff. It was just kind of weird, kind of off-the-wall conversations about sponsorship stuff that just didn't seem. It sounded more occultish than it did AA. And I thought, man, what? And so before this meeting like this, I guess I was going to do something else, and then I decided, well, I'm going to take this in a different direction like that. And I had a bunch of these little stubby yellow pencils that they have in games and stuff, and I had some index cards. And so there was like 80 men at this conference, and I just said, guys, do me a favor. While I'm passing out these cards, I want to ask this question. How many of you guys are convinced that you know how to sponsor somebody? And every hand in the room went up. And I said, all right, good. So everybody's clear what they would do in a sponsorship situation. And 80% of the room, yeah. And I said, okay, well, interesting. So I want to do this. It'll just take 2 seconds to do this, but let's find out. The card that's in front of you and the pencil that you have in your grip, I want you to write down the first 3 things that you would do if you were sponsoring somebody. What's the first 3 things that you would do if a man walked up to you tonight in a meeting and said, would you carry me through this work? And one guy over here started writing, and another guy over here started writing, and everybody else just looked straight at me. Everybody else, nobody even picked up their pencils. And a couple of minutes later, I said, so there seems to be a little disconnect between what you think you know and what you really know. Is that right? And everybody goes, well, yeah. And we're all laughing, and everybody's feeling a little bit uncomfortable. And I said, well, look, let's talk about that specifically like this. Because look, if this is life and death for the people that come to us, then where's the room for ambivalence? Where do we have any room for this kind of stuff like that? Now listen, but before I do this, I want to preface all this, guys. I'm not talking about creating an army of zealots out there beating people up with a big book. I'm not talking about being rigid with anybody. I'm just saying, if the book talks about on page 17 a common solution, couldn't we at least move towards that so that at least it looked common? I mean, is that too much to ask? Probably not. Let me tell you what the number one deal, at least this is where I'm going to move this in. This is in from fact column into opinion column. It's my opinion based on years and years and years of sponsoring hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of men. My viewpoint on this is that the single biggest thing that we stopped doing, that we should have been doing all this time, was qualifying people. Now, listen, so if you could see your faces, some of you guys just went, "What? Get your purse, we're getting out of here." Why does the idea of qualifying the drunk and helping him see his truth, why is it so offensive to some of us? I'm not judging it because it was to me. I'm just telling you like that. I found it hugely offensive. I'm not trying to be exclusionary. It's not like we're trying to keep people in and out, this kind of stuff. It's not about any of that. It's about the pain of watching men and women sit in our rooms year after year after year, ambivalent about their own disease. You get that, right? And we see it all the time. Because let me tell you something. If you're not convinced of your own disease, if you're not convinced of your own situation, how do you teach it? How do you help anybody else? This is the reason why we have so many people that want to play games around 12-step work, around sponsorship, and around carrying the message like this, because they're not convinced of their own alcoholism. They're not convinced of their own disease. We always want to go straight to the idea about our drama. Go to any meeting, anywhere, worldwide, and throw out a topic on the table. What makes you think that you belong here? And 99.9% of everybody that shares will do what? They'll go immediately to their drama. Well, I got a DWI. I got in a squabble with my wife and I pushed her, or I lost my job over my drinking. I'm not making light of any of it, guys. None of it. My frustration, my problem though is that it didn't define your alcoholism. Did it? Come on, guys. How many of you guys know people that my mom at 5 o'clock every afternoon drinks a glass of wine. Every afternoon. Does it make her an alcoholic? No. Could she get a DWI if she drove after that? It's possible. There are thousands of people in the United States every year that get DWIs that are not alcoholic. They just drank and made a bad decision and got in a vehicle, right? And we see this all the time like that. And so we end up with that woman sitting in our meeting, or that man sitting in our meeting, and they're the ones that seem to, for unknown reasons, have the biggest yap. And they want to always talk, and they want to always share about come, I want to hug on you. I love you, but man, shut up. Because you haven't had the experience. You don't know what you're talking about. crazy. I know it drives some of you nuts. It's all inclusive. It's all roomy. I get that. I so get that. But I got to tell you guys, it creates all kinds of problems too. So let's talk about this thing for just a second. If my primary function like this, let's say Mikey comes over and he asked me to work with him, so I'm going to take him and we're going to sit down like this. Now we're going to sit down. We're out. The meeting hadn't even started. We're going to sit on the hood of my the tailgate of my pickup, and where it's not windy like this and it's not cold, and we're There's not dead guys laying in the bar ditches because they froze last night. Golly, it was cold last night. And we're gonna talk about some stuff, and I'm gonna qualify them like that. You guys got your book. Turn to page 44. On page 19, 20, and 21, they qualify. On page 44, it's one of the greatest places in the book to qualify. I'm amazed at how many times I look at people in book studies, and I look over at their book when we're studying this, and this stuff on the title page of We Agnostics, where I look over there, and their book's not marked there. Listen, can we get something straight right now? If your book is not marked at the top of page 44 of We Agnostics right there, if it's not marked, real careful, like reach over and grab your buddy's pen and mark it real quick so we won't judge you. Because I'm getting ready to if it's not mine. I'm just fooling with you. But this is big stuff like that. So, all right, let's look at this thing like that. I don't know Mikey from spit. I don't know him from nothing. All I know is that he asked for some help, and we're going to see what the deal is like that. And it says, Mikey, in the preceding chapters, you've learned something about alcoholism. That's the previous 51 pages. We've learned something of alcoholism. We hope we've made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. Why is this important? If Mike's not an alcoholic, he doesn't need to work this program like we need to work it, right? There's desperation in your face. If you're the real deal, you know you've got to work this stuff. If he's a disco drunk and he doesn't need to work it like this, he will not work it. He will not do it. All he's going to do is take up a bunch of your time. And we can find out right now whether does it mean that I'm going to diss him? Does it mean that I'm going to be rude to him? Does it mean that I'm going to run him off? No. Quit going there with that. It doesn't mean anything. It just means I'm not going to spend a bunch of time trying to get him through work he does not need. Dig? So look at this. I'm going to ask him these two questions. If when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely. Or when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take, you're probably alcoholic. Choice and control. That's the two questions that they just asked us. Have you lost the power of choice and control? They didn't say anything about the drama. Did you ever go to jail? Did you ever, the 40 questions before you go into treatment? They didn't ask you any of that stuff. They're asking you have lost the power of choice and control. If you have, welcome. Welcome. If you haven't, brother, come sit, drink some coffee. Wow. Okay. There's a lot of other places I could suggest where you could, get the same kind of fellowship if that's what you want to do like that. Look at the next line. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only 90 meetings in 90 days will conquer. No. Wait a minute. My bad. It didn't say that. It didn't say that. But I know, 'cause that drives some of you little meeting makers, make it guys nuts, because it didn't say that like that. But look at what it said. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which what? Only a spiritual experience will conquer. Guys, that's some pretty heady stuff. My question is this, and I'm not trying to be inflammatory. I'm just asking you the question. How many meetings would Mikey have to go to have a spiritual experience? Maybe none. Maybe a bunch, but maybe none. Maybe we could accomplish this sitting on the deck of my truck. Maybe. You see, we don't know. But the idea that he has to go to X number of meetings before he can have a spiritual experience, I think is something that we need to investigate. Everybody always wants to say, Meyers, you just hate meetings. I don't know where they come up with that. Do I hate crazy meetings? Yeah, I think they're a waste of time. I do. I think a lot of things happen in the meeting format that shouldn't happen because the formats are goofy. The formats allow crazy stuff to happen like that. All we need to do is change some of these formats and we'd fix a lot of this problem. I love meetings. I want you to go to as many. If your lifestyle will let you go to a meeting 2 times a day for the rest of your life, rock on. I so dig that. I do. My question is this, guys. What if you're a young mom with a brand new kid and a job and you're trying to juggle school and you've got all this other kind of stuff and we're going to try to now burden you with the absolute... How can you do 90 meetings in 90 days when you have all this other stuff to do? Oh, it can be done if you really can. Forget it. Forget it. We're asking you to drop this burden that's been your alcoholism and drug addiction for years and years and years. We're asking you to drop that, and we're going to sell you on the idea of another kind of bondage. This nonstop meeting when we have so many people that can't. I'm not saying don't go to meetings like this, but I'm telling you right now, there are some people that can't. And so now I've got this little girl who can't go to that meetings because she's trying to hold a job and raise a brand new baby, and she cannot go. And now we're gonna make her feel guilty because she's not doing 90 meetings in 90 days. I'm sorry, guys. This is bullshit. This doesn't line up with any part of this text. None of it. It doesn't line up. And we need to quit telling people this kind of stuff because it's a cop-out. It's just a cop-out. If we could sit with her and study with her and help her see some of this stuff, she could have an experience so amazingly profound that she would walk free and clear of this stuff, and she wouldn't have to be doing all this. And then as her lifestyle begins to change, as things begin to settle down a little bit, she can come in, be a sober member of this deal, and she can go to as many meetings as she can possibly go to. You understand? I just want to be clear on this deal. It just... Okay, what... I just think I saw somebody reach for a cabbage. Don't. The cabbages hurt. Throw something lighter. This butts up against hard doctrine that we talk about in AA sometimes. This is real sensitive stuff because we've been taught from day one that the meeting is the most important thing. Meeting makers make it. This kind of stuff like that. And I'm not saying you all get that. I'm just blown away by how many people, including me, that were dying in AA going to a whole bunch of meetings. We're going to talk about it some tonight. Nicer, but we're going to talk about it. But it's just like, so if I've got him sitting on the deal like that, and I've asked him this question, and we agree based on these answers that he's bona fide, that he's the real deal, I go, terrific. And I said, Michael, let me ask you another question real quick, buddy. Tell me where you are around the idea of God. I don't need to know a lot of detail. I'm just trying to figure out what I got. Do I have me a card-carrying Satanist in front of me? Do I have an agnostic? Do I have me an atheist? I just want to know where he is in the big picture of his view on God. Because all that may change anyway like this. But at least I've got some idea about what's going on. We talk for a few minutes like this, and then time permitted, the meeting is still 10 or 15 minutes away like this. The time permitting, I'm going to ask him to look at this third step proposition that we're talking about. Is it possible that you could turn your will and your life over to something that looks like this? Could you do something like this? And he'll say yes or no. And I'm just at this stage of the game, I'm just trying to get a deal. But I'm going to ask him the all-important question for the third primary deal. I'm going to ask him the big question. Are you willing to go to any length to do this? And he'd go, well, sort of, or maybe, or yes, or whatever. I want to ask you this question. Flip back over to, where did I put that? How it works. Page 58 in your book. Halfway down the page, is there any piece of literature in AA that we don't read more than this right here? In tens of thousands of meetings a day, we read this before meetings like this. And it's to the point now to where we read it so often that most of the time we just shut it out. We're not even listening to what they're saying like this. It's the last time we can send that last text to the girl that's sitting right across from us, or we go get coffee, or we just don't even... 2/3 of the way down that page, there's a great line. If you've decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. Guys, that's the deciding factor about when we start this work. And you didn't have to sit in 6 months' worth of meetings to make the decision. We just made it sitting on the hood of the tailgate of my pickup, asking Mikey these questions like this. Yes, I'm an alcoholic. Yeah, I'm okay with the idea of God in my life. I'm not sure he's kind of stuck sideways right now, but I think we can deal with this kind of stuff. If he says, I hate everything about God and I wish he would die. I mean, if I got a guy that says that, kind of like that, we're going to tap the brake. We're going to slow down a little bit, and we're going to go over to We Agnostics, maybe not then, but at some time in the next day or two, we're going to read We Agnostics, and we're going to try to break down some of this prejudice, some of this stuff that goes on like this. But you'll go over this over and over again with the men and women that you sponsor. You're going to go over this exact same thing like this. I want to be the proactive one. I want to be the one that's trying to make sure that we're staying with some momentum going on this kind of stuff. Page 24, they talk about we won't remember the pain and suffering of even a week or a month ago. We were without defense against the first drink. We're going to talk about it some tonight, guys, like that. You do not have a lot of time. It is a race. We're going to talk about it. Y'all, y'all are clear. How many of you have seen people, how many of you in your own experience have seen times when you were being AA month after month after month and you don't seem to be making any progress? You know you're in the right place. You sense that everybody loves you. You sense that it's better than where you were, but you're not making any forward progress on this kind of stuff. I think that's our fault. As sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous, I think it's our fault that we take a very, very passive view of how we work with these guys. And I think if we would be just a little bit more aggressive in this kind of thing, they would have an experience much, much faster, and we'd be better off. We'd have a much stronger fellowship. I mean, does this sound stupid to anybody but just me? It's like, okay, buddy, I love you more than anything in the whole wide world, Mike, and I want you to get this like a big dog. I'm telling you right now, I'm so excited for you and want you to get this, but we're going to wait for a year for you to get this because we're going to do a step a month. I love you, comma, but I want you to wait and maybe risk dying. Page 24 just nailed it, guys. If we're not careful like that, because we're battling something that's bigger than just a behavior problem. We're battling an internal condition that's going to kill us if we don't do something. We don't have a lot of time. And that's the reason there is indeed some urgency in. And the old guys, the archive guys, they sensed all of it. They knew this stuff. They knew it. You don't believe me? You go pick up that archive book over there, that great big old format, the big piece that's about like this by like this, and they got a collection of letters over there from 1939 to 1942. Read them. Read them. You will be blown away. Because the fellowship that they describe has some urgency under it, and compared to our fellowship today, which has no urgency whatsoever. Just keep coming back. Just keep coming back. All the time we're getting sick. All the time. We got to be really careful here, guys. If in the success rates on this stuff, we're worldwide, we're just in the toilet on this kind of stuff. And most of it is because we've stopped being insistent that if people are serious about recovery, that they also be serious about the idea of working work and having a transformative experience with that work. Once they've had that experience, then we're going to put them in the trench with us, and they're going to carry the message with us. That's how you build a fellowship that's effective. Otherwise, we just end up with a bunch of disco guys and a bunch of hangers-on and guys drinking coffee and looking at girls and hitting on girls and causing 10 kinds of problems. And y'all get that, right? Okay. Let me talk about something real quick, and then I won't do all this thing like this. There's a little deal. I also have this on an email, and we're glad to send it to you. When I sit there talking to Mike, we're going to go through this kind of stuff, but I'm going to ask him. The book says, "Are we willing to go to any length?" But I don't think it's fair to ask somebody if they're willing to go to any length and then not tell them what that looks like, right? And so this was a list that Chris and I had come up with years ago, and you can pick or choose. I'm not going to read them all like that, but I want you to just hear it. Some of you guys are going to go, "Oh, I'm going to." Just hear this, and then I think you'll see the wisdom in some of this stuff, because it changed everything about how I sponsored and how proactive I was. The number one thing on this thing: are you willing to be qualified? I'm amazed at how many people don't want to talk about their deal. They don't want to answer questions about this stuff. I don't know why, but there are a lot of people that get here by mistake, and we need to know. You're welcome to stay. That's why we have open meetings. That's why we have the fellowship we got. It's great. I'm not trying to run anybody off. But I sure would like to know before I spend a bunch of time and effort working with somebody that they're the real deal. 2, are you willing to take the steps quickly? It is a race. I just simply go back and you look at the archive stuff, go back and talk to a bunch of old dudes, and what you'll always find with ad nauseum, I mean, it never changes. You'll find this repeated theme of we got them in the work as quick as we could, and they had an experience quickly. Go back. Come on, guys. Go back and look at Dr. Bob's story. Go look at Bill's story. Go look at Ebby's story. Go look at all of these cats that went through AA number 3. Go look at their experience. 2 or 3 weeks into the deal, they had an experience profound enough to catapult them away from the nightmare that was their alcoholism. You know this. Why do we think that we're better today? Our success rates aren't even a fraction of what they were in those days. And yet we want to sit here in our arrogance and cross our arms and go, well, we just understand this better today. That's foolish. These guys were far more successful. Why don't we try to align ourselves with what they did? Right? I don't know. Some of you guys are just hating this shit. I want you to be willing to attend specific meetings early on. Okay, just hear me out. I don't want you going to any meeting you want to go to. Any of you guys that have been involved in sponsorship, how frustrating it is to leave a book study where they're getting some ground and they're getting some traction under them about what's going on, and then 2 days later they go to the resident open discussion meeting that goes on forever, and then they come back with a head full of questions, a head full of conflict. Don't you think that they're going to end up in those meetings getting a bunch of conflicting information with what you're teaching them in a book study? Absolutely. And they will be confused, and they're going to come back and talk to you. I'm just saying, later on, if you want to go sit in those crazy-ass meetings, rock on. Go sit. But early on, I'm just saying, early on, wouldn't it be great to sit with your protege in a literature-based meeting and talk about the life-saving steps and the result of that? Wouldn't that be cool? There's other things that we're going to do, too. We're willing to focus on just the big book for a little bit. I know some of you guys love the 12 and 12. I do too. I know there's other literature out there that AA loves. I do too. Early on, right off the bat, I want you just in the big book so I don't have to fight the battles of the conflicting pieces of information. By the 1950s, when the big book came along, the 12 and 12 came along, there was already some pushback. There was already some conflicting information, especially around inventory. So if you want to open up a can of worms, rock on. But I just think just for a little bit of time, until you've had an experience, then you can go back and read everything you can get your hands on. We're fortunate to have some cool stuff. Are you willing to be completely honest? We're talking sex, checks, and medication. I want you to be really, when I sit down with Mike, I want to know everything about you, brother. I want to know about your love affair with weasel porn. I want to know I want to know everything that's out there that's going on. I want to know about your medication problems, what you're taking, what you're not taking, all of this stuff, so that we know. I want to know where you are financially in the big picture of things. You don't need to hand me your checkbook, but I just need to know, man, do you have every creditor in town chasing your ass down? Or are you okay? Where are you struggling with this deal? You got a girlfriend on the side? I want to know what's going on. I want to know about it. Now, my job is not to judge it, but I want to know what's going on, because when it blows up in your face, I don't want to be caught out in left field going, I had no idea that he was dating 4 other women. I didn't know. You see? I want to know. If you're going to be honest, you got to be honest with somebody, right? Can we agree on that, right? I think so. Willing to be open-minded about anonymity. Guys, it's okay to tell people that you're in recovery. It's okay. It's just like, I want to, do me a favor, besides Googling my name on the internet to send hate mail, besides that, go when you have nothing else to do and Google Dr. Bob's statement on anonymity. Just go Dr. Bob's statement on anonymity and it'll come up, and then you can look at it and see what the deal is. Guys, look at me. We are not supposed to be anonymous to ourselves. We are not supposed to be anonymous to ourselves. Quit that. I'm blown away by how it's a soapbox issue with me, if you can't tell. I'm so annoyed with people going, oh, do you know Phil S. over in Abilene? Are you for real? What's his last name? Well, we're supposed to be anonymous. No, we're not. Not to ourselves. Listen, your problem is not with me. Your problem is with Dr. Bob and the people that came up with the traditions. They're clear at this thing. Where the anonymity starts at the level of press, radio, and film, above that, it's it. You read it. But you can tell by the way Dr. Bob wrote it that it pissed him off too. Look at the way that he wrote it. Because the inflection in the way that he wrote it said, hey, if you don't get this, you're an idiot. He didn't say that, but you can tell by the way that he said it, the way that he wrote it like that. So, it bitch slapped me, because I'm always the one that introduces him. Well, I'm just Meyers R. But let me tell you something. You go to see a brother in the hospital, and the only thing you know is his name is Mike. Go ahead and see what they'll look at you in the hospital like you are an idiot. Wait a minute, this is your best friend, and you love him more than anything in the whole wide world. You spent the night in the waiting room waiting to see him, and you don't know what his last name is? Just saying. Willing to take a service commitment? Now. If I'm sponsoring you, you're going with me. You're going where I go. And when we go to Salvation Army, you're going to go with me. No, I'm not going to throw you up there in the lion's den. You're not going to be up there carrying a big old message like this. But you know what? There'll be a day when I'm going to say, brother, you see this page 62? I want you to read from here to here. It's one paragraph. Read that and sit down. I'm going to get you started with the idea, but you're going to do something to get out of that squirrel's nest that's ahead of yours, and that's how that stuff works out. Are you willing to be accountable? That's all three parts of that AA triangle like that. Are you willing to be accountable on these deals? Unity, service, and recovery. You get drunk, and in our conversation, the very first thing I'm going to ask my buddy here is, tell me what you were doing in these areas. And almost always it's going to end up the same thing. She's going to a bunch of meetings, but she's not doing anything else. She's just going to a bunch of meetings. But then we're going to know. We're going to be able to help her see this kind of stuff. In the early days, they used it as a great deal like this. Matter of fact, in my bag, I've got a little circle triangle stamp. If your book doesn't have a circle triangle in the front of it, after they unceremoniously took it away from us with no debate from us, if you want it back in your book, come see me and we'll stamp it back in there so you can have it. That circle and triangle should never have been taken out of there. If you got a third edition, it's in there. If you got a fourth edition, it is not. So we could fix that. Are you willing to learn the traditions? Yes. Yes. We're going to get you through the deal. Are you willing to follow guidance about meeting etiquette? Man, I'm just telling you, man, we're going to have long, hard conversations about this kind of stuff. Are you when the seventh tradition comes around like this and you pass it? I see this all the time in AA. It passes. You got a $5 Starbucks sitting in front of you, but you don't have $2 to throw in the basket. Let me just tell you something, brother. What you better watch out for is when you say the Lord's Prayer, you know who's going to be standing next to you? Me. And it's not going to be a pleasant conversation. I want to try to explain to this kind of stuff. This isn't free, and it takes money to pay rents, and it takes money to do the things that we got to do. It takes money to buy books, and it is not free. We're the greatest collection of takers on the face of God's green earth. And the part of this coolness about getting back into the stream of life again is that we can be responsible. We can be responsible to our own upkeep and our own maintenance. And that stuff is important. Guys, if you're sitting in a meeting and if you can't concentrate because all you're doing is looking at that special someone across the room, we're going to talk. We're going to talk. If you can't keep your butt in the seat more than 2 seconds because you're too busy getting up so you can walk past that special someone, or you're getting coffee 3 times and you're going to go to the pisser 3 times and you're going to stop. We're going to talk about this stuff. If you're coming to the meeting and you're dressed inappropriately, stop. If you want to play gangbanger, way on into sobriety, go right ahead. Part of changing is change. Part of this thing is to be different than what we were. And if you want to look like a little dope fiend still, rock on. But man, we're going to talk about some of this stuff. And I'm real free with it. I'm real free. You see, because I believe that sometimes it's like. So people do things in AA not because they're evil or not even because they're mean or anything. I just think that we've stopped teaching people the things that we should have taught them in the first place. How do we behave in a meeting? After a talk, come up and greet the speaker. Say thank you for coming, for giving his time, for doing these kind of things like this. It's not just to run out there fast to smoke a butt and talk to that special girl again like that. If you're using a cell phone in the meeting, guess what? Quit. Etiquette dictates certain things, and we have a responsibility to teach people that. Well, you're just going to run them off. No, that's not been my experience. You can justify that if you want to for not saying anything. I'm blown away by how many times I'll see gals, if you're coming to a meeting and you're still dressed like a stripper, I love you, but you got to put some clothes on. I got men that are coming from halfway houses that haven't been up close to a girl in 9 months. They're dying, and you're totally distracting these guys. And it works the other way around too, guys. It works the other way like that. And so these are just some things we're gonna talk about and make sure that you're clear. Once we define these edges a little bit, I know one that always pisses them off, and I always want to leave it out, but I'm not going to do it like this. If I'm sponsoring you, you're going to look at your own exercise and health. Some of us have been brutalized by our disease, and we get off into this kind of thing, and we forget what it's like. I've got guys that have become couch potatoes. I got guys that sobered up and gained 50 pounds as soon as they got into AA. And I'm not trying to judge it. I'm just trying to say, guys, if I'm going to sponsor you, you don't have to. You can go find another sponsor. But if I'm going to sponsor you, you're going to be responsible to do something. It means you're going to learn to walk. Let's go for a walk. I'll run every day, and let's just go do something to get off our butts so that we can experience a life different than what we are used to. You see, most of us have spent life moving away from life. We've just kind of gotten out there on the fringe like this, and what we're trying to do is get you back into the middle of things, and you can do it a lot better if you're healthy and feeling good about yourself and how you look and how y'all get that, right? Go back and look at chapter 7, Working with Others. It gives you great illustrations about how we're supposed to help these guys. Fred's story, Jim's story, these are all great illustrations of what we do in 12-step stuff. The stuff that we talked about this morning that we're just done talking about right now, the stuff that we've been talking about, can you see how being a little more focused on what it is that we're supposed to be doing will be beneficial to other people? So there won't be this ambivalence. The last time somebody asked you to sponsor them, what did you go? If you're like me, what you did was you went, oh no, I got to sponsor this guy forever. I'm going to have to raise him. I'm going to have to haul him around. I'm going to have to buy him cigarettes. We just create this monster in our head, and it's not like that at all. It's not like that at all. I have one job in sponsorship, to tell you the truth that I see. To tell you the truth. I'm just going to show you what's going on. Like that. If I think you're straying, my job is not to stop you from straying. My job is to tell you the truth about what I see. Hoss, you're headed for a buzzsaw. I know she's pretty, but I'm just telling you, this is what I think is going to happen. Regardless of what I say, guys, he's still going to go get her. But after the fact, then we can sit down and go, you remember the conversation? Remember what we talked about? Remember me talking to you about how badly you will hurt her? Did you not hurt her? Yes. You see what I'm saying? This idea of sponsorship is some kind of short leash that I'm jerking them back from things like this, that I'm kind of like that. One more thing and I'm done, I promise you. The sponsorship is like raising kids. How many of you guys have kids? Okay. When the kids were little and they went this way, where did you go? That way. You're just like this. And they walk over here and go, no. And it's just kind of unnerving. It's a little, but that's the way it is with the same kind of thing with sponsorship. By the time you get a kid to junior high school, you should be able to do this. You may be leading off still. You may be kind of moving towards where they're moving. You may be paying attention to it like this. But you should be able to, by the time they're in high school, you better be able to go home and go to sleep and know that at midnight they're going to be at home because that's what they told you that they were going to do. It doesn't always work out that way. You understand what I'm saying? But this is what we're after. 6 months down range, if you got a guy that you're sponsoring or a woman that you're sponsoring and you're still having to take 15 calls a day from her because she's a fruitcake and you got all this stuff going on, something's wrong. Something's wrong. If you're always trying to rake her out of the fire because of problems that were set up like this, something's wrong. Go find out what it is. What part of this program is she not getting? What part of this thing is she not leaning into, God, that causes the problem? Y'all get that, right? All right. I love you guys. Listen, y'all don't go home and tonight I'll be much better off. I'm going to suit on and I'm going to be much calmer. But I will tell you this in all honesty like that. I do love you enough to tell you the truth, just like Cliff Bishop did with me 18 years ago when I left middle of the road AA and got involved in a little more disciplined view of what this program looked like. He saved my bacon. He took away all my fear about sponsorship. He took away all my fear and anxiety about what was going on, what was my responsibility was, what my responsibility wasn't. And the clearer I became on that, the more willing I was to step up to you in a meeting and greet you. I no longer tried to avoid your gaze because I didn't want you coming up and talking to me like this. I'm in your face going, buddy, can I help you? Can I help you? Can I help you? Then that's how we build a fellowship. That's how we keep a fellowship here for another generation. I love you guys. See you in a bit.